I'd like to call a meeting to order. The Board of Leavenworth County Commissioners. I'd like to invite everyone to stand for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to begin with a moment of silence, please. Roll call, start with Commissioner Culbertson.
Here.
Commissioner Smith's present. Commissioner Shimke.
Here.
And Commissioner Stevens. Here. And Commissioner KAAZ.
Here.
All commissioners are present in some form. We do not have any public comment, I believe, at this time, so we'll move on to administrative business. Mr. LOUGHRY.
I have a few items today. One, the clerk asked me to remind everybody that advanced voting will begin here in the courthouse on Wednesday the 14th. People will be able to come in and vote. They'll just have to come to the door. The clerk will come out, escort them in, allow them to vote. So if anybody wants to take advantage of that, it starts Wednesday the 14th here in the courthouse. Two, some of you may have seen in the news that there's been a lot of attempts at unemployment fraud, unemployment claims fraudulently filed, and almost every county and city in the state has experienced one or two employees at a minimum, some several. The last number from the state was that they have caught approximately 45,000 fraudulent claims. We have had employees who have had fraudulent claims tried to be filed on them, which means they have to have some form of personal identifiers. It would seem that something at the state, some database at the state has been accessed, because some of the people who are having claims filed on them are information that would have been 25 to 30 years ago. Maybe maiden names or previous married names from 25 to 30 years prior. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands it's not information on our end, our systems. It's that we believe it's a larger database, maybe at the state level. So we have had multiple employees somebody who's tried to file fraudulent claims on them. So it's widespread. It's not just us.
Okay. So does LifeLock take care of that?
LifeLock does assist with that. If for some reason that happens, you report it to them and they assist you with making any corrections or notifications. So that is one of the covered things. And I think we probably had an email that went out from our HR department, maybe even earlier this week or end of last week.
We did. That
talked about that. So again, we have had several employees who it's been attempted on their accounts. We've looked, and the clerk asked other counties, and all of them replied that replied said we've had at least one. Some of them have had over 100 of their employees people are trying to file on. And it's a lot more profitable when there was the extra $600 that you could get per week for the KAAZ Act funding for unemployment. But it still is ongoing. So it just seems to me that given the widespread nature of it and the nature of some of the data, that this is something that the state needs to get on top of, because it would seem to indicate that the state has some database somewhere that's been accessed and they're not aware of it.
Okay.
Last item I have on administrative business, you have a policy that I either laid at your desk or handed to you earlier this morning. This pretty much mimics the policy we adopted last week. But then in this case, that one was for the human service organizations. This one's for arts, culture, and tourism. I think if you remember, we originally included the historical societies in our KAAZ Act funding. The state said that they did not believe that would meet the requirements of the KAAZ Act funds, so we removed it, put that over into the human services. Late last week, the state reached back out and said, well, now we think we have new guidance that might work. you could maybe include the historical societies. Monday I drafted this policy, sent it over to the state yesterday to ask them to review it. I have not heard back from them yet, but given the time frame, I would ask the board to consider it today, so that if the state replies and says it's good to go, we can get on top of it, because they have until the end of this month, first part of November, to get any applications in. So just asking you to consider it. I know that's not typical because it is not on our normal agenda, but the timing of it, I'm asking you to make an exception in this case.
I agree. We need to pass it before it changes again.
It's literally 2 weeks difference. The email was, no, this doesn't work, to, yeah, we think it probably would work. Why don't you submit something to us and see what we think? So.
Okay. Is that all you have in administrative business?
Yes.
I'd entertain a motion on that, on the policy.
We can do that, and I have a question for him, too.
Okay.
We can go ahead and do this if you want. You want me to
Whatever
make a
you want to
motion
do.
I make a motion that we approve the CRF Arts, Culture, and Tourism Grant Application Policy and Procedure as proposed.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the policy? And voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner KAAZ votes aye.
All right. Thank you.
Just a quick clarification. There's some things on social media circulating about the upcoming discussion about building codes, about it raising people's insurance premiums. And I think that publicly we should at least have that dispelled. Is it correct that other counties surrounding us have building codes and there's no significant discrepancy between our county and them as far as insurance rates?
I think that would be I would be hesitant to answer that specifically without making inquiries of an insurance company that would cover both counties. I can tell you that we're not aware of any direct correlation that building codes has with insurance premiums, to my knowledge. There are the counties around us, several of them do require building codes. Douglas County, Wyandotte County, Johnson County obviously do. Out in the county and in the cities also do. I know that on insurance policies you can apply for an additional coverage. It's called building code coverage, I believe. I think as you saw with the tornado, we had claims that came in and the insurance companies would not pay the difference between what your house was and what current code allows. And so there is a building code gap coverage, I think it's called, that you can add to your policy. That would be true regardless of codes in the county. So if you have a home that was built, in Leavenworth County, we probably have homes that were built in the 1800s, some of them. But let's say mid-1900s, and it's damaged significantly where it has to be repaired, and you have to build it to code if we had codes. There may be a gap in that coverage, which would exist today or if we had codes, because most builders aren't going to build that house back to 1950 standards. I don't even know if they would know how. And the insurance
Hardware stuff.
Yeah. There might be some hardware stores that still have that. Yeah, that was good. I didn't want to say that, but so anyways, I think there is a gap. There could be a gap, but that gap exists today, whether we have code or not. I would want to specifically make that inquiry of an insurance provider, some big provider like USAA or Nationwide or someone like that, to get a good answer for you, Commissioner.
Can you see before the hearing that we have an answer for that?
And to add to that, Mike, I've already talked to 3 insurance carriers, and that's the way it was explained to me. One of them used that to explain it to me. The reason there is that extended coverage extra premium is because there's not building codes. So if you wanted your house fixed and it needed to be brought up to code, you pay a little extra so that your house can be built to code on your premium. If you pass codes, all the insurance companies in that community that has codes reflect that, exactly what you're talking about. So I don't understand how it's not understood that it's going to raise premiums. I mean, it's pretty simple.
This is Commissioner KAAZ.
Go ahead.
If Mark is going to reach out, he needs to reach out to an underwriter and not to just a basic insurance carrier company, because the underwriters are the ones that make the determinations based on algorithms. And so it doesn't stand on any individual policy that the cost of the policy is going to be the same from one person to the next. They enter a lot of data. They don't share that information. It's proprietary, it's proprietary, so they don't share how they come up with what they're going to charge for a premium. They don't even share it with the local insurance companies. They just come up with it. They provide that figure to the insurance carrier, and that is what they quote to the consumer.
Yeah, you're not going to get this information from a local agent.
No, I'm not. No, I didn't figure I would.
Yeah.
And also, my understanding is it's optional coverage, one way or the other. So,
No, I think it's a fair question, and clearly there's a lot of concern. So we need to spend some time in making sure that we know the answer to that. My only argument would be that it's pretty easy to look Leavenworth County and adjacent counties and the valuation of a home, whether it's a $100,000 home or a $300,000 home, and what that typical policy costs, and quickly get to that answer, regardless of what an agent thinks, a broker thinks, or a policyholder thinks. No offense to any of them, but
Right.
data's helpful.
Yeah.
And then another issue's come up. Well, why is this an issue? Why has this come up as an issue? And I think certainly the tornado is one very important reason why this is an issue. People had their homes destroyed. They then ask to have it rebuilt. Builders are typically building up to code now. When they want to build up to code, insurance company kicks back and says, well, you have no codes. So you have no codes, then there's an issue of whether they're going to pay or not. So we want our people, if there is a tornado or a disaster, to be at least protected on a minimal level. And a minimal standard of codes would protect Leavenworth County citizens.
But you have the option to get that now, Mike, but you want to pass codes on everybody and raise everybody's insurance for a few people.
I don't want to raise anybody's insurance. I don't want to raise anybody's insurance. I want to protect our citizens.
So you're going to...
This is Commissioner KAAZ. I think that we need to realize that insurance premiums might go up on a home that has been remodeled or repaired after damage, because the value of the home might go up when it's brought up to code and when the repairs are made, but not existing residences that have no work done.
And I think that's the difference. I think when your value goes up, it's based on when your valuation goes up, it's based on the value of your home going up.
Insurance companies aren't in the business to lose money. If they have one home insured that is not built to code and they have a damage to it and they have to bring it back up to code, they're going to pass that cost on to everybody that has their insurance. Even if you have a brand new house that's built to code, they're going to pass on what they had to pay for the house that wasn't built to code on to everybody.
But our builders... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
That's not necessarily true. We really don't know what algorithms and the data that is being entered is going to do. A lot of it, there's just so much that goes into it.
Well, I think we're just...
It's not necessarily going to translate that there will be an increase in the premiums across the county because the county has cut. I would venture that there were a lot of underwriters who were not aware that there were no codes existing in Leavenworth County, and that they wrote premiums based on that to begin with.
I was just going to say, I think we
based on having codes in place.
the insurance companies a little too much credit as far as what they know is going on. And I think we do the same for the government, for what that's worth. But no, it's a big topic, and a lot of this started, one, because we were being requested because of the damage from the tornado. Two, we're pushing a lot of development. We want new homes built. We're pushing for businesses in the county. Well, we got a lot more businesses in the county that deal with patrons, and so there's some things or some concerns that come along with that. So I think it's a big conversation and topic. I don't know that we're solving anything this morning, but I think if we can get more data as far as what the impact would be, even, hey, if you look at 2020, what was built in Leavenworth County versus if we were to adopt something like this, what wouldn't or couldn't have been built in 2021, or what that cost differential would be. or how we're going to deal with more and more of these businesses that are dealing with, clientele and seeing, customers out in the county, whether it's a great big venue or whether it's a small business. So I think those are all things that are worth spending some time on.
Okay. And we will have a discussion on it in 2 weeks. Okay.
Any other questions like that come up, please feel free to pass them along, and the staff will do our best to try to get answers for them.
And then tonight we have the public hearing on the comp plan at Planning and Zoning, correct? Okay. One question on that. Once we adopt the plan and say the County Road 1 rezone is a part of that plan, whether it's part of it or all of it that we'd used before, when the zoning changes, but the land use doesn't change, and say somebody wants to put in light industrial, that does not require notification of adjacent landowners once they change the land use, or does that?
Well, I think there's still the rezoning process. So the land use, any development has to follow the land use plan once it's adopted, just like the one that's currently adopted.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that it's zoned for that yet. That's why we've moved forward with the rezoning at one time on County Road 1, because the land use plan said this is what we're going to do. Then the next step would be to rezone that corridor so that when development comes in, it's done. They can just move in there as long as it's an allowed use. If it's not, if there's a conditional use process. Countywide, we would not rezone the entire county. We would just have a land use plan.
Right.
If somebody came in and wanted to, let's say there's an area now that's not commercial, but with the new comp plan it says this would be a good commercial area, they would still have to go through the rezoning process, which requires notification.
So it would have to go through rezoning.
And I'm
Okay, that's just on the land use on the comp plan, but if we go ahead and rezone the County Road 1 corridor,
yes,
that does not have any conditional uses, correct?
well, there are still conditional uses that so there's
fit in that zoning class.
Right, there's a table of uses that are allowed, and then there's a table of uses that are allowed with a use permit, and then there's the non-allowed, which would require a variance. So there would still be some uses that would have to go through the process, but the ones that are allowed would be able to just move forward with applying for building permits.
And not do a public hearing and send out notification with everybody in 1,000 feet.
Correct, because it would be an allowed use in an already zoned area.
All right.
So, if we adopt on the 28th this comprehensive plan the way you foresee it or envision it, are we incorporating the current land use plan that's currently been adopted for County Road 1? Is that incorporated into the comprehensive plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else under administrative business before we move on to consent agenda?
Not for me.
All right. All right. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look at the consent agenda? Is there anything that needs to be pulled off and voted on separately?
This is Commissioner KAAZ. Please remove the check registry from the consent agenda.
Okay.
Mark, I had a quick question. I saw, I think it was USD 458.
Pacers?
Yeah. Is there any type of, master document or anything that's showing where the CARES Act funding has gone or is going, or as we continue to track towards what's been allotted by the federal government, and just, understanding what some of these different entities are receiving? And while I'm in support of any and everything that we can do to help all these entities, there's no doubt every entity was impacted. The question does become, in some instances, businesses is primarily a loss of revenue. However, the only thing that's really been done for them is to help with expenses. In other areas, they didn't necessarily have a loss of revenue, but they had a huge reduction in expenses, because when you have to stop dealing with, say, kids for a period, there's probably some expenses there. So I was just curious if, just so people can stay educated as to who and where between, the schools and other outside, agencies, cities, where the funds are going.
Yeah. So we have a spreadsheet. It's a form that the state created that we have to submit to them, and in fact, it goes in today to the state with school districts, I think I brought this up maybe 2 weeks ago, they changed the requirements for school districts. So originally, the school districts were handled like all other entities. They had to submit their invoices and they had to have shown actual expenditures. But from federal guidance changed, which then had the state change their guidance that says they can lump it into, I think it's one of 6 categories. And if that expenditure fits within that category and they're not spending more than $500 per student in total, then they don't have to do the additional step of providing the invoices and everything else. So that's why you see this one go through. None of the other entities were ready to go yet because they haven't been approved by the state. This one, because of the change to the requirements, it's coming through. So
in thinking about our schools in Leavenworth County, but going to even adjacent counties with larger school systems, you could have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 kids in a system, and as long as they're keeping it under $500 per kid,
yeah,
it's kind of rubber stamped
in aggregate. Yeah, so it's not just for like this time, but in total, as long as they don't reach that $500 per kid in expenditures, they just have to classify it in one of 6 categories, which is like distance learning, direct expense, capital improvement, that kind of stuff. So as long as it fits within one of those categories, they submit it to us in that spreadsheet that says these are the expenditures for these categories. And that's the guidance from the state and the federal government. That
so $500,000 per 1,000 kids. Okay.
I wish that they would take that approach for all of the entities because it would make it a lot easier for tracking.
Well, just give it till next week. They might change.
That could very well be. Hopefully not for the worse.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on the consent agenda? Concerns? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda without the check register.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cobb votes aye.
All right.
Now I'll make a motion to approve the check register as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the check registry. Any further discussion on the check registry? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cobb abstains.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on to the formal board action. Mr. LOUGHRY on the...
I have a few here. Yeah. Yep. So the first item here, we discussed this a little bit last week. I have a couple amendments to policies that I'd like the board to consider. The first one being the sick leave buyback policy, and that is just clarifying language that was inserted in there to explain that if there are 2 employees that are a spouse relationship, that if one continues to work, the money that is part of the buyback for the one that's retiring could be utilized to offset the health care expenditures, which I think was the intent all along. We're just clarifying that in the language. And then the other one, the educational tuition and fees reimbursement policy, as I stated before, as we go through it and we apply it, things come up where it needs a little additional clarification or some other stipulations put in there. Primarily, we ran into some instances where employees would be reimbursed from another employer, or maybe they were getting the GI Bill or something along those lines, and then they would submit the expense to us. We'd reimburse them, and then they would also get reimbursed from the other employer. We're just clarifying that that's not allowed, that you can only get coverage for things that aren't paid by some other way. And if there is also a shortage, so let's say the GI Bill pays 75% or only pays tuition, doesn't pay for books, that the county would then, under the policy, they could submit those to the county for the ones that weren't covered. So those are the changes that were made to those 2 policies.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on these? I'm sure we've all read them. And I'll entertain a motion to approve the updates to the sick leave buyout and tuition reimbursement policy.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 All right.
Commissioner Cobb votes aye.
Okay.
Say, Jeff, you were kind of the architect of that one.
And then Any questions on the EMS?
Yeah, so that one is, again, just clarifying that the way EMS earns holidays a little bit differently than everybody else because they're shift workers. So this is just clarifying that if they get to the end of the year with their holidays, that those can be paid out if they didn't have a chance to get them used. We haven't ran into this in the past, but because Jamie does a very good job of administering that. But this year, because of COVID, it's a little bit harder to let people get their vacation in. And as you all know, we have a lot of holidays between now, basically, and the end of the year that they get caught up in. So he just asked for this consideration. I think it's reasonable and would ask the board to approve that.
Ready for motion?
Yes, sir.
I'll make a motion to change the county handbook in regards to the EMS holiday hours, allowing payout for hours over the maximum carryover at the end of the year.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the policy change? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cobb votes aye.
All right, we're ready for Crystal.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Morning.
I have before you 3 items. The first item is we are bringing back the preliminary and final plat for High Point Estates, which is the plat that we spoke about extensively last week. There are, I don't believe there are any outstanding issues on this currently. As of when this RBA was written, we did still have two outstanding issues. However, one of those, the drainage study, that has been remedied, and I believe that you have a access management policy coming before you shortly that will remedy the other issue on this plat. Staff, of course, recommends approval of this plat. The applicant's here. We'll answer any questions that you may have.
Anyone have any questions of the applicant? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the final plat for High Point Estates.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cobb votes aye.
All right, thank you.
The second item I have before you is a preliminary and final plat for Bell Estates. This is a 5-lot subdivision at the intersection of 235th Street and Dempsey Road. The plat in and of itself meets all of the zoning and subdivision requirements. However, we do still have an outstanding drainage issue. The last that I was aware, I do not believe that that particular item has been corrected. It's possible it was corrected this morning and I just haven't been made aware, but as of yesterday it still was not corrected. Again, the issue with the driveways will be addressed with the amendment to the access management policy. Again, staff recommends approval of this plat in and of itself. However, it does still have that drainage issue outstanding, I believe. It is staff's opinion that those items should be addressed prior to adoption for final plat. However, we brought this forward after last week's discussion. We want to make sure that we are being fair to all applicants and all applications. Applicant is here and will answer any questions you may have.
Crystal, I clearly don't have the memory of my peers and staff, but last week we were having the conversation specific to drainage, and I don't know that it was answered. We got to this access management piece and made some headway, but the drainage, I think, was kind of left open-ended. And the reason I'm asking is we don't have crystal balls and we don't know the future and what ultimately ends up being built or constructed, whether it's a 1,000 square foot home or a 10,000 square foot home, is all very different as far as how drainage on a particular parcel could be impacted. Maybe they want to have a moat. That's something that maybe in today's age people should think about. What is the discussion to maybe have around that as to why that's so critical before dirt is even being moved, with us being completely unknowing of what's going to be built 6 months from now or 6 years from now?
So, as you know, not an engineer, land use planner, but I will answer that question
Me neither. So
to the best of my abilities. So it's my understanding that the engineering component of this, they do take averages, and they are able to essentially, the biggest thing that we want to make sure that we're not doing is we're not creating runoff onto somebody else's property. We cannot do that by state statute. That is against the law. Your development on your property cannot negatively impact your neighbor. So what they do is they take the average size home, the average size driveway, and they put all of that into a calculation that is way above my head. Now, you are correct. There could be instances where, say that we have designed for a 25 square foot home, which is fairly common. That's fairly average. We don't see just a whole lot of homes that are, especially if they're ranch style, spread out, that are just a whole lot larger than 2,500 square feet or so. Now, somebody may come in and say, I want to build a 6,000 square foot home. You're right. That could definitely happen. The same principles apply, though. You cannot negatively impact your neighbor. That's something that we hear about on a very regular basis,
Sure.
as you are all very aware. So what we're trying to do is we are trying to identify up front any problems that we may see. And just like with anything, when you actually get into the development, there may be things that we were not able to foresee, but we are trying to check all of the boxes up front and to identify any problem children that we may very well have and work around those. That's the biggest reason that we want to see that drainage work done prior as opposed to on the back end.
While I realize the intentions may be good, I think this is a scenario of, again, surgery successful, patient died. I don't think it's our place to make those decisions ahead of time because you don't have all the information. Again, whoever the builder is or whoever the lot owner is has to take that into consideration based on what they're going to build, whether it's a whatever size house or secondary structures or how they want to address their driveway or driveways. I mean, those things all have implications on their neighbor, and it's their responsibility and their cost. So I'm trying to figure out why as a county, I'm making myself responsible for something that I can't necessarily dictate the end game anyway, and ultimately is the responsibility of the landowner and comes at the landowner's cost. But I'm taking on additional time, potential engineering, headache, when at the end of the day, I can't control what's going to happen, whether it's next month or next year, and it's completely the landowner's responsibility and cost anyway.
So what I'll say in response to that is, under the current structure that we work under, when you come in to get a building permit, we require almost nothing. We have no building codes, as you are all very well aware.
Wait, what?
We do not require engineered site plans. I think you guys sometimes think that I'm kidding when I tell you that I literally get site plans on napkins. I am not kidding.
Oh, I know.
I'm not kidding. I think it's a great idea that we say the homeowner is going to be responsible for this and the homeowner is going to give us everything that we need. And if we begin to require that, if we say, hey, from now on, when you want to build a home, you have to have an engineered site plan and you have to build it to that site plan. And you have to have an engineer who signs off on it and says this isn't going to negatively impact your neighbor. Then I think we could start to have a discussion about when that engineering is done, if it's done up front or if it's done on the back end. We don't have that currently. I can't tell you how many calls we get a week from people who say, my neighbor is building a barn or my neighbor is building a house in an unplatted tract of land. And I've got runoff. Their septic system is inundated with water every week, every single week. And my answer, unless it's with the septic system, is always, I'm really sorry, but there's nothing I can do to help you. This becomes a civil matter at this point in time. The county does not regulate drainage on the back end, nor do I think that we necessarily should. If under the current regulations that we have, there is no way to know on an unplatted tract of land whether or not it's going to negatively impact their neighbor. We do say, hey, this is on you, and if you do something and your neighbor sues you, well, good luck to you, sir. So I would love to have a conversation about having actual site plans that are engineered and account for this sort of thing. But currently we do not. So it's my opinion that the only protection we really have for neighboring property owners, not the property owner building their house, but the neighboring property owners, is that up front we are identifying potential issues.
Well, it sounds like we've done that, and yet you still get phone calls.
Like I said, we have a lot of unplatted tracts of land out in the county. So if it's an unplatted tract of land, we don't have any drainage studies on it. It's just it got divided by deed maybe 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago.
Right.
I don't see it as often in platted subdivisions. I really, really don't. And I think that's because we're able to mitigate a lot of the issues up front. And I certainly understand and appreciate the argument that oftentimes we're talking about large tracts of land. So I think the idea is, well, this is a really large tract of land. How on earth are we going to do anything that's going to negatively impact the neighbor? Which is a very reasonable thought process. However, for whatever reason, everybody in the world wants to build their house 15 feet away from their neighbor's property line. I don't understand it, but
Right.
that's what they do.
And then, and to your point, there's plenty of lawyers around, so if they want to litigate that after the fact because they've created an issue with their neighbor, seems like a fence viewing. Like, is it really about the fence?
But at the same time, if you're on top of the hill and your neighbor's down at the bottom of the hill, they're getting your water anyways.
That is a fact.
Right.
I believe that's called gravity.
It is. Water runs downhill.
Path of least resistance.
So I didn't mean to take us too far out of the way, other than I felt like that was left on the table last week, and I didn't feel like I had the clarity, and I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts. I hate the fact that, again, we're trying to determine the unknown, which is a very silly place to be to begin with. And so I'd like to put the accountability and onus on whoever's doing the development, whoever's building the home, whoever owns the land, and if they are doing something that goes against either by engineering or negatively impacting a neighbor or whatever that is, that's on them to resolve and stop getting me in the middle of it.
But I think it does make an awful lot of sense that you would do it at the time of construction, not at the time of platting, because I always say these are nothing more than lines on a map, lines on a piece of paper. They did nothing to change that property. So what happens in the future, somebody may only build a 2,500 square foot home, but they want to have a walkout basement in an area where there's not room for walkout, so they build it up, which creates even more runoff. But they could do that and not have to do any kind of study now. So I totally agree, and I think what Crystal's saying is that makes a lot of sense. That's just not currently the process. And to do that, then you would have to require that the builder or homeowner, whichever it may be, provide engineered plans at the time of construction, which, again, would make a ton more sense because we don't know if they're going to build a 2,500 square foot or a 10,000 square foot, or if they're going to build potentially a 100,000 square foot event barn on their property,
Right.
which has a lot more runoff.
Much bigger
So
implications.
yeah, so I think that's a really good point, and I really think it's something that we should address. It's just currently this is the process.
Understood. So I would just ask, and unless anybody recommends something different, I'd love to see what you and your team might propose that would be in lines with something we're not going to require up front in platting that has no implications versus taking a closer look at what those implications are when construction actually does occur, whenever it might occur, by whomever it might occur by. So.
Yeah.
You talking maximum percentage increase or minimum percentage increase of runoff?
Well, I think that would have to be determined as part of a policy.
Right.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody has any thoughts on how to influence the policy, I'm just asking.
I mean, 1 or 2% increase. Is that really
negligible, right?
I mean, you could take a piece that's in grass now and plant a garden there and increase it that much. Especially if you water the garden. So, any thought, Mr. Herring? Okay. I look forward to all work sessions.
So, question on this policy, and this may be for Mr. Herring. If we wait to get this drainage study, is that going to?
Has it been?
Oh, so we have it.
So it maybe came through late yesterday afternoon. Yeah.
Okay. Well, my question was going to be if we waited on the drainage study, is that going to impact the ability to do?
So it sounds like we could approve this one as presented and then still be having the drainage discussion going forward.
I think
right.
bullet point 7 that says they have 30 days, basically, that'll give you time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Any more discussion? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve case number Dev 20-097-098. Preliminary and final plats for Bell Estates.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
Abstain?
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Todd votes.
Okay. We got, thank you. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Crystal.
We got one more.
Oh.
I do have one
You're
more.
taking this one, or is Bill?
I'm going to take it.
All right. On the.
Commissioners, I have before you a request to utilize Resolution 2019-20, which is the gating policy. I believe that you're all very familiar with it. We have used this a couple of different times. This is for a portion of 211th Street, which is located north of George Road. It is essentially an unmaintained goat path. That's just really what it is. Property owner owns about 160 acres. And in 2016, the property owner contacted county staff. At that time, the property owner was told that when he pulled a building permit, a portion of those fees would be used in order to open up that right-of-way, gravel it, and give him the 300 feet of actual road frontage that he needed. As I believe all of you are aware, that is not a policy, and it's certainly not a policy today. When the property owner contacted planning and zoning this summer and said, I would like to go ahead and get this rolling, we said, we're really sorry, but we're not going to be able to do that. We need to find another solution. Our other solution is the gating policy. Now, that being said, our gating policy, which would allow the property owner to essentially put a private drive in this unmaintained right-of-way. That's essentially what we're asking to do, and to allow no more than 2 houses to be built on this unmaintained right-of-way. So, it's essentially a private driveway is what it is. The county will not maintain it. That will be up to the property owner. As you know, the policy that we currently have does not allow for residences. So I'm asking you for an exception to that policy. I'm also asking to grant staff direction to amend that policy so that if we need to use this in the future for a very similar circumstance, we will be able to do that.
Okay. Well, this is already gated, isn't it?
There is a gate on it. I don't know who gated. I believe it's been gated for a very long time, and I don't think anybody got
20 years.
I don't think anybody got permission to gate it.
Well, they didn't.
But
Just ask for forgiveness.
but right.
Nobody uses it. Nobody knew. Right?
Right.
Nobody. It's not been a problem.
Yeah, no, it has not been.
It's it's been gated
Fence a
for
road.
years.
So
So I'm going to guess whether that discussion happened or not. They clearly weren't able to provide anything in writing as far as any discussions that were had. My point being is that if
from 4 years ago, you mean?
No,
Yeah.
there is. Yeah, no, it was in writing.
it
It
was
was in
committed
writing.
by the county in writing,
Right, that we would go out and rock this
And use the RIF and
essentially-
TIF money.
Right, and
But-
essentially build.
Yeah, but that
Or
policy
money
has
is
changed
not-
regardless. At the
Right.
time, that wouldn't have been allowed, but even since then, we've changed the policy.
Right.
In fact, just this year, I think,
Right.
end of last year. So I think the other thing that happened when we implemented the gating policy, we didn't allow for private drives in our right-of-way, which we've since amended and allowed. So then now that what they're asking to happen can happen, we just need to go back and amend the gating policy to allow private residents back there, like a private drive where there's no more than 2. So
This person probably didn't put the gate up. It's probably the previous owner.
Yeah, no, it's been there.
Yeah, it's been
long.
20 years. I believe this person's only owned it in the last 4 or 5 years.
Correct.
no, but the point of this is that they were given bad guidance at the time. It wasn't current policy, and I realize policy is going to change. What I cannot stand is any governmental entity giving direction and then going back on what they told someone. That
Sure.
drives me absolutely nuts.
So,
Right.
one thing I would like to
In
point out
writing, of all
is when that direction was given was in 2016. That's when our building permits were $7,000, significantly higher than they are now,
Right.
as you well know. One of the things that staff had talked about internally is if we were to try to honor this, then are we going to say, oh, it's going to cost you an additional $3,500? Because that's really what you were looking at $6,000, but we're not collecting near that. So now it's going to be this additional. That also doesn't seem fair, right?
Right.
So I feel like this is the best path forward. It solves not only this issue, but it also solves potential issues down the road.
And property owner's okay with this solution?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then if he's okay with it, I don't see we need to dig any deeper.
Fair enough.
If he's happy, I'm happy.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions on that one? Then I'll consider a motion to approve the closure of an unmaintained portion of 211th Street, north of George Road.
A separate amendment to the policy later, or are we going to do that in the same motion?
No, we'll bring that back.
We'll have to do it later.
Yep.
Let's just get this one taken care of.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion, second. Any further discussion? You see it on the map right there behind the gas, Southern Star.
Yeah.
All right, no further discussion. Voting?
Aye.
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 Mr. Costa, aye.
All right.
Now you're finished with me.
All right. Well, thanks for coming up with a solution for this, gentleman.
Yeah, absolutely.
No problem. That's what we do best. Thanks, Commissioner.
Thanks, Chris. Have a great day.
Now we're ready for Mr. Knoll.
Yeah. All right.
Howdy, Bill.
All right. Today we have a couple agenda items for your consideration. I will start with the access management policy that we discussed last week. As a part of that access management policy discussion, we discussed revising the separation minimum requirement for driveway spacing, separation distance requirements on local roadways. Currently, the way the policy is drafted, instead of having a 125-foot spacing requirement, which has been the policy in the past, the current policy reads as follows. Each lot is allowed one primary entrance. Lots that are 3 acres or larger shall be allowed a secondary entrance. The secondary location must meet the same line of sight requirements set forth for the primary entrance location. Residential lots fronting upon a roadway classified as a local road by the Leavenworth County Comprehensive Plan shall access the roadway with an entrance in a location that meets the line of sight requirements generally accepted by engineering standards within the AASHTO Green Book. It is desirable that they be designed and located to meet criteria for intersection sight distance and other design elements set forth. However, where this is not practical, they shall be located to provide the best reasonable sight distance and meet other design criteria to the extent practicable. Lots with frontage on roadways of various road classifications must place their entrance along the roadway with the lower roadway classification. Any lot that abuts a local road and has secondary frontage must utilize the local roadway for its access location. All lots that have frontage on interior subdivision roadways must access the property from said interior roadway. And so that addresses both a lot of the discussion last week and some of the issues that have arisen over the past 6 months with various properties where you have frontage on multiple roadways. We ask that they take their access to their property from the safest location possible, and that's generally the lower traffic roadway or the interior subdivision roadway where it was designed to be taken from. If the board has any questions regarding this policy, I'd be open to discussion. If they have any amendments they wish to discuss, we can have those at this time as well.
Commissioners have any questions for Mr. Knoll? Going once, going twice. Then I'll entertain a motion.
Is there an actual resolution number for this, Mark? It says XX.
Yeah, if you look on the agenda, it's 2020-37.
So I make a motion that we approve Resolution 2020-37 adopting a new access management policy.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the new access management policy?
Thanks for putting this together.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. That's great.
Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Costa, aye.
To avoid future frustration by looking at the same access management policy multiple times, there will be some further discussions. It was mentioned offhand, But this was specific. We were kind of trying to address the concerns from that specific plat, and so this language was provided the following day after last week's meeting. There will be a future review and discussions probably had regarding the roadway spacing requirements that are also part of the access management policy. And so if we are discussing this in the coming weeks and frustration arises because it wasn't addressed at this time, I want to make it clear that there could be some future discussions regarding this policy and amending various portions of it if you guys feel that is applicable. But today, this addressed all of the concerns in the discussion from last week. But we do have other portions of the policy that we may discuss in the future. The second request before you today for your consideration is a change order request for some additional billing for some design consultant fees on the T-34 structure by Benish Engineering. We knew from the time that I started that at some point this would have to come forward to the board. The roadway that this bridge is located upon is a dust abatement roadway. When they initiated the design process for these bridges and did the field survey work for the design, the roadway was a gravel roadway. We asked, county staff at the time asked that this design be put on hold. That was approximately last October. It had been on hold since then until this proposal had moved forward because it was not hard surfaced at that time. So what they had to do, or what they are in the process of completing, is they are going out and doing some additional field survey work to pick up the roadbed itself to tie in those elevations. This does require them to raise the bridge structure approximately the 4 inches of asphalt that was added to the roadway, and tie those cross sections in. So they would have to raise their 4 cross sections. Discuss this change order at length with Benish. They feel that it is appropriate for the services being provided. I'm open to any discussion you want to have about that, and or consider a motion. We don't really have any alternative direction that we can provide at this time, as we need to complete this design, and we do know that there are additional costs associated with this.
Bill, I may not be understanding this correctly, but would it not make more sense to lower the approach to a bridge rather than raising a bridge, or am I completely off in my understanding of what's being asked, or what's now occurred?
Well, the bridge is being replaced, so they could have gone each direction from it and feathered out that asphalt roadway.
Right.
Generally, you don't want to have the water coming down or the roadway coming down to the bridge, with the bridge being the lowest point. Generally, you want to do that opposite, where the bridge is built up and you
Okay.
build. So when they design the bridge, they should have a bit of an approach coming up to it, a little bit of a rise in elevation, and they will cut that dust abatement roadway back at least 100 feet in each direction and repave those approaches at that time.
Make that all work.
To make that all work, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. You could have done that. We could have done that work prior to the dust abatements and tried to make it fit the existing design, but they still.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out which one would. I mean, it seems to me going back with the same height and location of bridge would have made more sense. But maybe not. Maybe
almost every bridge that I've ever been a part of, which has been
quite a few,
20 of them now, quite a few. They always raise them. Almost always raise the bridges up because they're trying to provide. They were designed at some flow rate, 20-year, 30-year, 40-year flood event before they are overtopped, and those rates have increased. FEMA has updated those rates, and so when they do their calculations, if it was designed...
Now we get 100-year floods annually.
Annually, yeah. And so now, if they want to design to a 30-year event, that generally requires them to raise that structure up some. So almost every, I don't know of any bridge that I've ever been a part of that structure wasn't higher than the
Okay, great. No, makes sense.
But to your point, it was designed and it would have been higher anyway. We knew that it was a 4-inch asphalt overlay that was coming in there. We could have adjusted in a rural area where we're not tying into concrete curb and gutter.
Right.
And it would have been really close. But that's not the direction that they were willing to pursue with their design firm.
Not to exceed $6,700.
Yeah, that's what they provided us.
Okay. Just so it wasn't a makeup for the other one on
Well,
change order on another
No,
project.
the $1,700 of this is they don't do their own surveying in house, so they've contracted the surveying. So they're being charged $1,700 for the surveying. The portions of this that I argued with them extensively, and they were adamant that it needed to be a part of their request, was the quality control. They have 8 hours of QC, QA design revisions as a part of this proposal. I felt that was overly extensive to have a project manager look at this. Previous to this going through, before I was employed here, they allowed this project to be built out to 92%, but we never went into a field check or into an office check or plan set in this, so there should have been quality control as a part of the final review of the process, but they feel it's necessary to provide us a product that is acceptable to be submitted to a client, is what their opinion is.
So, Bill, to your earlier point, out of the 20-plus bridges you've been a part of, they're always built at a higher elevation anyway. So the only thing that we really changed was the hard surface, which added another 4 inches of, grade terminating at the bridge, which, again, they're going to take back 100 feet, you said, of both directions anyway. So the bridge was already going to need, the likelihood the bridge was already going to be elevated above its current location was 100%, it seems. But now, because we hard surfaced a road, these other couple of inches, ultimately, even though the 100 feet approaches are going to be tore out, has resulted in several $1,000s worth of cost.
Yes, that's correct.
Just want to make sure I understood it.
Yes.
Doesn't suck any less. But.
No,
No.
it does not.
And we delayed this a year,
A year.
so I hate change orders. I mean, I just hate them. But we did delay it.
Yes, it was delayed.
We didn't get any credits for all the other bridges that didn't get designed that should have been designed, did we?
Well, they're still not complete with those designs as well. We're really pushing hard to have SH30, which is one of the 4 bridges that they're designing, bid here in the next, or we're going to release it for construction engineering inspection proposals in about a week and a half. And so we're trying to finalize that one of the 4 that they've been a design part of. We're also trying to finalize the bridge inspections. We do not have, you guys signed a supplemental agreement to the bridge inspections to provide the aerial thermal imaging to try to locate weak places in decks. That information hasn't been provided to us, and you guys are aware of the inspection request that they've made that we did not approve as part of McIntyre Road.
Right.
And so it's a very extensive list of
Issues.
ongoing and but why those other projects are not finished that have been in design since this one was put in hold is, in my opinion,
Unacceptable.
unacceptable. Yeah,
I think we actually put those out for design 3 years ago, if I'm
I believe that's
remembering
correct.
correctly.
Right.
It would have been
2018.
about this time. Yeah, it's almost 3 years.
To have a relative discussion of appropriate time frames, we put SH22 out a few months back. I expect to have a set of plans on that from a different consultant in a matter of a week or two. We already know the bridge type. We are really just sitting at a point where we're going to have a title company look for some court records on a drainage easement that may have been acquired through eminent domain. 60 years ago, and that's really what we're down to at this point on that design. And we're only 3.5 months into it, where we're 3 years into these designs, and we're really trying to push hard to have something ready to go forward for SH30 at the end of the week. And so we're working in two different spectrums.
Yeah. We don't get any credits or anything when something's inspected and passes inspection but ultimately fails, right? We don't get any like refunds or anything.
No.
Oh, if you get a new bridge,
Get a new bridge at your expense. You get a
To
closure.
pay for a new bridge.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
bridge deck was, that bridge deck was poured yesterday.
The bridge deck was poured today?
Yesterday.
Yesterday?
The E58 bridge deck was
Did you go write your name in it?
I've been down there watching it for the last 36 hours and nobody walked on it.
He slept down there in a tent.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, well,
That's
all we
dedication.
do.
I believe you.
I actually believe that story. I don't think it's sarcasm.
Yeah.
It's not sarcasm.
So,
Anyways, so you think we need to move forward with this?
yeah, I don't think we really, unless we want to
No.
litigate
Like I said,
this project in the
We're
future.
really just trying to get things wrapped
We're
up.
trying,
with this
yeah,
Understood.
and we did delay it a year. We did put it on hold, so. If there's no further questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the change order.
I'll make a motion to approve the change order for Benish for the additional consultant services on the Leavenworth County 4 Bridges project, specifically the additional survey work required for T34, not to exceed $6,794.
Have a motion, to have a second? It's your bridge, Commissioner Stevens.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Do I have any further discussion? I just want to go on the record saying I do not like change orders.
Here, here.
I agree with you.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Then voting?
Aye.
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 Abstain. I'm still mad at Benish.
Commissioner KAAZ?
Yeah. Orders.
Was that a yes or a no?
No.
Okay.
So, Bill, just to remind us all, though, we have now taken very different measures and approaches to one. You've already talked about how we're inspecting bridges going forward. Two, our requirements to how quickly designs on bridges are being turned around. And three, we are having penalties on any and all projects relative to timing, performance, all of those things, which are everything I just mentioned I don't think existed before
Yes.
this year. Okay.
Yeah, we're trying.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the direction that we're taking. We may be having some more extensive conversations about penalties next week.
Love it.
Okay.
That's all I have,
All right.
unless you guys have any further questions about any of the stuff.
No, I think you
Thank you, sir.
answered E58's questions.
Did you ever hear back from KDOT on K32 Highway and 158 traffic light study?
Nope, and I have sent them additional emails, and I still have not heard back from Sarah with the traffic engineering group that I'd originally sent back. So we're going to have to go through Mr. Van Nice with the local Bonner Springs office, or we'll have to get a hold of the District 1 engineer because we are not receiving any feedback on that request at all from.
I did get an additional letter is going to be drafted from the Linwood City Council. They all agree that traffic study needs to happen as well, and they'll be forwarding that letter to you
Okay.
as well. But so I guess we're going to have to build some pressure.
Yes, I think they're just way behind. I think they've sent a lot of people. I think there's several months
Right.
backlog on a lot of their work, and
We'll be having a lot of
COVID.
discussion in that area with the new school and everything else going on in Stillwell and K32.
yes, and that is being re-reviewed, so they might be under the impression that it's the same location when in fact it's not. Maybe there's some confusion there if it's the same people. I'm not sure, but I'll re-clarify and I'll start calling. I know that I believe individual that I did send those emails to that hasn't responded at all. When you do call it, she's working remotely, so I'll start leaving some messages.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll be
Thanks.
persistent. We'll be persistent until we get some sort of.
Thanks for all you're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, sir.
Okay. Anybody have anything to report on?
Met with the city of Easton Monday night, helping them with their COVID relief.
Oh, CARES Act, yeah.
Yeah, they passed the resolution to create a grant program for their local businesses.
Okay, well, that's good. You went to Linwood last night?
Linwood last night, same.
COVID or
And
CARES
they'll be
Act?
submitting, they're going to be working, I told them to work directly with Mark.
Okay. Yeah.
And,
Well,
David said they could call him too if they had questions, Vampire, if they had any questions.
so
Just get hold of Mark.
everybody's reached out. You've heard from everybody, all the townships,
I reached out to all the townships
township
in my
fire
district.
departments, stuff like that.
Yeah, so they've all been contacted. There's been communication back and forth. I can't say that all of the townships have responded with any type of a request or anything
Right.
like that, but they've all been notified.
I contacted Easton and Kickapoo Fire Departments directly and told them about it, so they're working on it, looking into it.
I think there was some confusion that a few of the fire districts thought if they submitted their wages that they would all be paid. There's still only a certain amount of money to go around. So not one township or one fire district can't take all of that money. It will be distributed equally amongst them based on certain criteria.
That's why it's important for everybody to get their request in.
Get the requests in, and once we hit that deadline, then we'll review what we have and determine how
Well,
we
no, and then
allocate it.
there's also a lot of these agencies that are in the cities, or their budget is allocated partially by the cities, in which
Yes.
case, whatever that allocation is, it flows through the city.
Yes,
So
true.
get
Very
with
true.
the city.
And this would be a good plug for the census, because a lot of people don't understand that that's how the money is calculated,
Right.
based on census
Right.
numbers. So
Yep.
if they don't report they exist to the census, that's
More
money
people
that
to
these
enroll in school. That's
places
just
don't
$500 a person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can just put that in a 401k.
Yeah, we'll all go back.
Yeah.
Now, and the money that is in our account now can actually be put in an interest-bearing account, correct?
Yes. Yes, they did change that. Yep.
Used to be you couldn't.
Could not put
earn
federal grant funds could not earn interest, but they've made a ruling that you could put it in an interest-bearing account.
Which that's a lot of money.
Probably because when you're given
low interest rates.
when you're given $1.2 billion to a state, they like to get interest on that. Even at 1%, that adds up
Just put it
pretty
in the
quick.
money market.
So ours is currently,
Ours is in one of our accounts that they do a sweep on. So
Anything else to report from any of the commissioners? Then I'll entertain a motion for the executive session.
I do have a request for 2 executive sessions today. One of them would be for preliminary property acquisition. And you should have both of those
Doesn't
motions.
matter which one goes first.
Might be easier to do the property first because I know the timeline on that.
Okay.
Probably just need 15 minutes for that.
Okay.
So I move this board recess from open session and go into closed executive session for preliminary discussion on the acquisition of real property as justified by KSA 75-4319B6, and that this board resume open session in the meeting room at 10:25. 15 minutes, is that what you said, Mark? 10:25 a.m. Present in executive session will be Commissioners Culbertson, KAAZ, Smith, Shimke, Stephen. Present also will be County Administrator Mark LOUGHRY.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the executive session? Voting.
Aye.
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 Both aye.
All right. Let the record show that we've returned from executive session and in regular session now. No decisions were made. Discussion was limited to acquisition of real property.
And I'll make a motion. I move that this board recess from open session and go into a closed executive session to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel as justified by KSA 75-4319B1, and to protect the privacy and interests of the persons involved, and that this board resume open session in this meeting room at 11:10 a.m. Present in the executive session will be Commissioners Culbertson, KAAZ, Smith, Shimke, and Steben, County Administrator Mr. LOUGHRY, Senior County Counselor David
He's
Van
in
Peer.
court.
Oh, yeah, he is in court. So
Yeah,
axe David?
You can leave him on the list. He may or may not attend.
Okay.
So.
And may or may not including Mr. Van Peris and others as may be invited by the board.
Have a motion, have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the executive session? Seeing none, voting?
Aye.
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 Well, let the record show we've returned from executive session into regular session. Discussion was limited to non-elected personnel. No decisions were made. Any other business for this board?
Nothing from
Then I'll
me.
entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Voting?
Aye.
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 You're adjourned.